All right.
Now I need to figure out how to go back a slide. Any idea? Can you click it? There we go. Okay, I think it's, we got about 1 minute here. So just having two screens, having one screen is just. Okay, so it is 1 o'clock and we do want to respect people's time today. So we're going to get started. My name is Jennifer Heaton Amrine and I am the section manager of the Land Resource Management section at the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. Here with me today is Susan Mockert, and she's our program manager for this commercial nitrogen optimization pilot grant program. We're glad that all of you can join us today just to go over the RFP and the application briefly. And then we are here and we have UW staff available as well, have them introduce themselves next to answer any questions you might have about the application process. Amber, Jerry, and Matt, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt Ruark. I'm a professor in the Department of Soil Science here at UW-Madison, and someone that's going to actively participate in this project.
Hi, I'm Amber Raditz. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, sorry. Jerry Clark, agriculture educator in Chippewa County. I've done several applied research projects throughout my career, and I'm here to assist in development of any ideas that people might have.
Hi, I'm Amber Raditz. I am the Ag Water Quality Program Manager and have worked for a long time with Discovery Farms as well, and I'm helping kind of coordinate the extension side of helping have resources available to participants and partners.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And to all of our guests today, I think one of the things that you'll probably have discovered when you saw the RFP, and you'll hear a lot today, is that this is really a partnership program between the Department of Agriculture, University of Wisconsin, and our producers in the state. So we're all collectively working on this together. And it's a new program, so we're figuring things out as we go along here. So our agenda for today is we'll go over the request for proposal a little bit, our application form, what the schedule is moving forward with this program, and then we'll take probably the bulk of the questions at the end. We did have a question right away is can we take questions throughout? If you have a question as we're going through, this is a very short presentation. This is really about getting your questions answered. So feel free to ask it. If we can answer it, then we will. Otherwise, we'll save it to the end.
Okay, the first thing we're going to go over is the request for proposals, which is one of the 2 documents that was released on the 14th along with the application. The request for proposals contains all the details needed for the application. It has links to the DATCP webpage and as well and to DNR project design documents. We have a list in there of eligible costs and ineligible costs, the annual reporting requirements as we know them to be right now. Those may be updated before contracts are written. How reimbursements will work, and data privacy statements as well. That's a very brief update of a very intensely dense document. So any questions you have about that?
It's actually UW project. Just notice it's actually the UW project design documents.
Oh my goodness, right. Sorry, UW, not DNR, UW. Is there a question or am I echoing? I think I might be echoing. Okay, the second document that we released was the application. So the things to, how do you apply? You're going to complete the application. You can complete it as an individual agricultural producer. A group of producers can apply on one application. Each producer regardless of whether you apply alone or as part of a group, is eligible for the maximum $15,000 award, 20% of which will go to UW to support their support of the project. Who can apply? I just kind of get into that. Any agriculture producer in the state can apply alone or again, collectively with a group. What is your research project? That's the main thing we want to know from the application. As Jerry said earlier, he is available and his contact information is in the RFP to talk about options of what your study can look like, what you want to accomplish, and he'll be able to help you find the right path to get there. And you contact at UW or other resources they have available. So what do you need to do on the application? You need to complete it in detail. We will be scoring it, and the scoring procedure is listed in the RFP as well. So you'll see the details that we're going to be looking at to score the applications, and make sure you address all of those. And that's how your application will be evaluated. We'll be looking at the details and how clear your plan is. And as Jenny said, this is our first time through this, so we're all going to be learning together what viable projects look like and how we're going to be able to help you get the projects on the ground. So before you start applying, this is kind of like your tax documents. What should you gather ahead of time? We'll need contact information for each producer on the application. You'll need to know who's going to get paid. We can't pay if you have a group of applicants applying together, we're going to pay one entity. So figure out who that's going to be, and figure out who can sign on behalf of a group. If you have a group of producers applying together, who's going to be the signature on the application.
This might be a case where you decide you want to coordinate with an existing organization or someone that can be your fiscal receiver, can handle some of those administrative documents if you are applying as a group of producers.
So those of you who are familiar with the producer-led grant program, it's kind of a similar concept there. So setting up the entity who can be paid, who needs to be a legal entity that we can get a W-9 and actually pay this person or entity. The study design, what is your research question? What is the design? What is your timeline? This is a 2-year grant program. So the timeline needs to cover both years, what you're going to be doing for 2023 and 2024. You also need to know what your budget is. What kind of stipends are you going to provide, or what kind of incentives? Are you going to be hiring consulting services? What equipment might you need? And other miscellaneous budget items as well. So after you've gathered all that information, the application would be due on January 31st. We'll be reviewing and finalizing awards in February, and we'll have a preseason webinar in early March, just to go over again where you are at that point in the process and what comes next. So that was our very brief presentation, but we have both the application and the RFP available. If you would like to ask any specific questions, we can pull those up. If you have questions for UW, we again have 3 on the line who can help with that. So can I take anyone's questions? Hey, in the chat, if a producer-led group received funding to do similar work, can the producer who is participating in that effort also be a part of this RFP? Yes, you can.
But you cannot get paid for the same things. So if a producer-led group received funding, whatever they might provide as incentive payments or financial assistance to the producer through the producer-led group, they could not get paid for those same exact things as part of this RFP. They would need to be distinctly different costs.
So if you're building on an existing program within a producer-led group, that would be eligible. But we tend to avoid any double dipping. Anyone else?
This is Steve Dirks, Coloma Farms. Well, you consider a group of growers doing the same thing, or do they all have to do exactly the same thing to apply? If you have a different crop in each rotation, is that 3 separate ones, or can a group do 3 different things on 3 different farms?
You could do 3 different things on 3 different farms. When you see on the application, on page 3, it talks about kind of explaining what you are planning to study. And it says, if you're including multiple agricultural producers, explain any differences in the proposed research for each producer. So you could still apply collectively as long as you differentiate kind of what would be different for each person.
Okay, thank you.
I got a
Hi.
question.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that. So, kind of looking at the details for what are the parameters of what would constitute like a plot? Because if I'm reading it correctly, we have to have like 4 plots replicated, correct?
I will leave that to UW. There does need to be some replication. I'm not sure if plot is the right word. If Matter wants to speak to that.
I guess my biggest question would be is the grower that we would be working with was kind of telling me some of like the advantages and the constraints of like how this plot would get set up. And the consensus was made that there would be more ease and a better setup of this the study if it was in a continuous stretch, meaning like, let's say if we did 6 acres and then we did 2-acre sections, but they would be continuous, like running north and south on this field. And then we get accounted for like, if there was going to be any difference with like soil types or whatnot. But generally, like when we did this, something similar to this this year, it all was in the same soil profile. So I'm just wondering if we would be able, if when we're filling this out, would we be able to put that into our application? Like, well, we're going to establish like a 6-acre plot, or I know you said don't use plot, but a 6-acre section, and then we're going to do 2-acre pieces, but they're going to be, you know, continuous. Would that still be okay?
Matt, would you, from UW, would you like to take that?
You know, Matt, that's probably there's probably a lot of detail in there that we'd probably want to talk about. I would say I'd start probably just with having a conversation with Jerry just to work out some details. I think the biggest thing that we've decided, right, is that this isn't going to be about demonstration, right? It's not just going to be a side-by-side comparison. It needs to have some level of statistical replication. Now, that said, there's some other things that we could do, right? I mean, so the simplest thing to do is to use the standard statistical approaches of replication and doing measurements like that. But there's always, you know, other things we can do, but then it gets to sort of like, I don't know, right? It kind of depends what you're doing, I guess, is the answer to the question. Or maybe the answer to the question is, I don't know. And let's chat offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that is the answer to, and feel free to continue asking the questions, but you're probably going to hear us and UW a lot say, contact Jerry to start having those discussions in more detail, because everybody's project is going to be different. So kind of working out what those details are and making sure that it makes sense from a research perspective. We want to make sure that you touch base with the UW.
Okay.
Another question came in from chat for a stipend for yield loss for the 0 strips. What kind of evidence are you looking for supporting information? We're looking for what your yield loss would be due to the 0 strips.
So if you know what you are getting for yield on the rest of your crop, and you can tell whatever that difference is between what your typical yield is and what you didn't get because you had a 0 strip, that's the type of evidence we're looking for, kind of what you lost in terms of a profit because of that.
We just didn't want to set a hard number there because we didn't want to eliminate specific crops due to the number that we chose. So we're just looking for everyone to come up with their own justification for the number that you're going to be including in your budget. Another question from the chat: could funding be used retroactively to cover costs with on-farm research began in the fall of 2022 that is not part of any other program? We did have included in the RFP that potential eligible expense would be activities that took place in the fall of 2022 that play into the setup for the project coming in the spring of 2023. So if you can make that connection with on-farm costs from this fall, this season, to where you're going to be starting up in 2023, that could potentially, yes, be an eligible cost.
Yeah, one specific thing that we listed was soil tests that were taken in the fall of 2022. But as Susan said, if there are other costs that are very specific to setting up this research, you could put it in the budget and we'll evaluate it as it comes in.
Steve Dirks again. Quick question, philosophical question. What do you consider success? Reduce light nitrogen or same yield, reduce leaching, same yield, or you could have an optimization and still get lower yields and make more money, or you could have optimization and get high rainfalls in our country and still have a lot of leaching.
Yeah,
So what are we measuring?
there's a lot of ways that you could measure success. So that's probably going to differ for everyone. Obviously, if there's less nitrogen loss to the environment, that would be a success, particularly if it was paired with either lower costs or like the same amount of profit for the producers or the same or similar yield. So it's going to be a combination of looking at all those things. And I think that's why we're looking for the producers, for you to kind of put your research together. What would be successful for you? Is it both using less nitrogen and having less loss and having the exact same yield, or are you looking at a net profit? Those are the types of things that we're looking for feedback from those participants on.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
So for the costs or like the payout, you know, like we're going to fund you up to this dollar amount, you know, besides different testings, whether it's like tissue, soil, does this also go into the realm of like, if there's certain equipment that we need to purchase, is that included as well?
It includes certain equipment that you could rent or purchase up to a certain amount. So those types of things, it would include administrative costs, or if you need to have ag service providers go out and help with sampling or data collection, applications. So all of the eligible costs are located on page 7 of the RFP. So equipment purchases that are directly associated with the research project. So if it's itemized, the rule, the administrative rule, emergency rule that kind of oversees this program says DATCAP pre-approval is required for equipment purchases over $2,500. If it is included in the budget of your application and we approve your budget, obviously that has been pre-approved. If you just generically put in your budget equipment and put a dollar amount, then we would need to approve it if it exceeds that $2,500 on any one particular purchase. But it also includes rental, and that's a little different than some of our programs, the fact that we can cover equipment at all. But we knew that there could be, with looking for innovative projects that optimize nitrogen, there may be some specialty equipment that people don't have available.
Okay, so like I guess, because I was thinking like one thing that I'm kind of forecasting in my head is if we were gonna do like 4 strips and then have a side by side where it would have a full nitrogen program and then the other one would have limited to no nitrogen program. And then if it was gonna be corn silage, and if we needed if we couldn't get our hands on something to chop and weigh that silage, I guess that's why I led to that question, because I don't know how much one of those costs or how much would those cost to rent either. So
Yeah, so definitely, check during this time that's available to put the application together. Give a chance to reach out to any of your agribusiness suppliers that might have that equipment either available to rent or to do some specialty work for you, or how much it would cost to purchase. Definitely put it in your budget if you think it's something that you need.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, Thomas Houlihan here. My question was more along the lines of, if we have 4 or 5 farms that want to work on nitrogen optimization, would each one, I thought I heard you say each one would be eligible for the full grant amount. And so I hadn't been thinking in those terms. I had been thinking, we all cooperate and we all work with one UW researcher and we share the info. But are you saying it could be, say there's 4 different farms working on it, each one is eligible for a $50,000 grant?
Yep, yes. So going back to the statute that was passed, it was clear that it is per agricultural producer. So each agricultural producer that participates, whether as a single applicant or as part of a group, would be eligible for the full amount. And I just want to remind everyone, it's $50,000 with 20% of each grant going to the UW. So it nets out at about $40,000 per agricultural producer. We don't know if it will cost that much. I mean, submit your application for what the actual costs are, but it does provide some financial resources to do these projects in a meaningful way.
Just to follow up on that quickly, say we had one researcher who was interested in doing this research on 4 different farms.
Yep.
Could each farm apply for 50,000 and then give 10,000 toward the UW, even if it's the same researcher for 4 different projects?
Yeah, the 20% that goes to UW is not specifically for the researcher. It's for the monitoring, the data analysis afterwards, all the coordination they're doing. So they have a very specific role that's been laid out in statute. So the researchers will be helping, but the 20% actually goes for the monitoring, data analysis, and some of the outreach and education work that will be happening.
Okay.
And Tamis, I'll just add to that so right now what we plan to do to be able to coordinate from the UW end is to have one position that would be in Matt Ruark's lab, that would be sort of the quality assurance, quality control, technical assistance kind of person. And then that could receive data and make sure that it was all there and things like that. And then we'd have one person with an extension that would be more coordinating and helping, again, also with the education outreach piece. So even with those 2 positions, if all of the funding is awarded through the funding that was made available for this program, there would still be about half of it left. That is the UW allocation, and that we would probably use for those specific researchers that the individual projects are working with to help with like supplies or analysis cost, to help with the things that for some reason aren't covered in the grant as it's written. So we'll have processes internally to make sure that no matter who you end up working with within the UW, that there will be, the ability for different people to access funds.
Steve Dirks again, that's an up to 10,000. So if you could make a deal for 5,000, you could do for 5,000. No, it says up to 10,000.
Yeah.
Does that mean below that, you can get below that? Doesn't say it must be 20%.
Yeah, it's up to 20%. I guess that's something we would need to discuss with UW before I could give you a hard answer on that.
Okay, all right, just curious. It doesn't say you have to spend the 10,000.
Yeah.
Just says it up to that. Okay, thank you.
Another question in chat in regards to the 2-year minimum time frame. The RFP also says that longer term projects will be more likely to be granted money. What are the ideal timelines you're looking for? Also, will having different crops over rotation be a detriment? The 2 years is set in the statute, and it also emphasizes in there that longer term projects should be getting priority. It is no further defined than that. So there is, in my book, there's no ideal timeline that we're looking for. We're looking for groups to come to us with innovative nitrogen optimization projects over, 2 years at least. And we'll go from there. And will having different crop rotations be a detriment? No, it will not. If you can explain in your application what's going on in your study guide, what your study plan. What question you're answering, how it can be answered over different crop rotations, what data you're going to be looking to get, et cetera.
And we would really recommend that when you're having conversations with the UW, that you bring up this issue about having different crops over rotation so that they can, whoever you're working with can make sure that your proposal makes sense and will have results that are understandable and meaningful.
If somebody did an NUE trial this 2022 year, would they be able to use that data to count as a 2-year look? Meaning like, okay, well, we did this this year. Let's replicate it again next year for 2023. Would that count as the 2-year? Or is this literally, nope, Matt, you got to do it 2023 and 2024?
You would have to do it 2023 and 2024. You might be someone that would be an ideal candidate for study option 3, which is kind of the self-designed study option where you could come in and say, hey, we've already done a year's worth of study. How can we build on that over the next 2 years? So that's something I would discuss with UW. That might be the thing that makes the most sense for where you are with your work.
Okie dokie.
I've got a question as far as plot establishment. So if I say I'm going to do treatment XYZ in corn for 3 years, does that plot or field or whatever have to be corn for 3 years? Or can the study move from field to field on the farm to keep in crop rotation?
It's a different way to ask that question.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's a good question for UW as well. If you have the RFP and you have Jerry's information, I would give him a call or shoot him an email and have that conversation with him. From the DATCP perspective, we're really trying to we'll be the grants manager and administer the program, but those real technical questions, we want to make sure that our science friends over at UW, that whatever we say, we don't lead you astray down the wrong path. So they might have something to add right now, but if they don't, I'd say contact Jerry when we're done with the webinar here.
Okay, thank you.
Anything UW wants to add?
I was just gonna chime in on that. I think it depends on what that goal is, Mike. If it is to study the corn on corn management, then the 3 years or at least those 2 years of the funding would, that's what your goal. If that's what your ultimate goal is to study that effect. But if it's in a rotation effect, then we'd probably look for, so it's always going to be corn on soybeans, or if it's something coming out of a cover crop or something like that, then we'd want to see that cropping system at best in the same, if it's a different field, but a very similar soil type. So that we're looking more at the rotation and the treatments within the rotation versus, and that's where the replication and randomization comes in. So we can kind of take out a little bit of that variable that could happen by moving to a different field. So I think we can work on it either way, but it's what that ultimate, what your design, what you're trying to determine through the study. If it's more important to stay within the crop rotation for you as a farmer to study that effect, then we'll try to keep the soil types as similar as we can. And the randomization and replication is what's going to be critical then. if that helps.
Thanks, Jerry.
Are there any other questions out there from our guests about the RFP criteria, the application process?
I've got one other quick one, and that is a couple of folks have asked me, if we get one of these grants, does that mean we are required to do nutrient management plans by the state? Do you know the answer to that one?
It is not a requirement of this grant program to have a nutrient management plan.
Okay, thank you.
I will, we did say option 3 might be to move into that option of a self-designed, having some sort of nutrient management plan is highly recommended. But certainly for the first 2 study options, it is not.
Susan, this is Jamie Fisher with Farmers for Sustainable Food. I'm just looking at the application and it looks like the maximum grant amount is 50,000 per agricultural producer. But then in the budget under, I think it's on page 5 of the application, it talks about estimated project budget. Under there, under category 2, it says the maximum for incentive and stipend is 2,500 per producer. Is that part of that 50K? Is that on top of that 50K? Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, it's part of the total 50K. It's just that the incentive or stipend payment is just a thank you for participating. Any producer that does this, they're putting time into helping the state with this research concern. It's just a one-time, it's a general provision of some funds because of the services you're provided by participating in this research grant. So we did put a cap on what that incentive or stipend payment would be. But there's no caps on the rest of it outside of the hourly. If you're getting consultant services, there is a cap of $25 an hour, which is what we use for our producer-led program as well.
So a producer who gets the $2,500 stipend is also eligible to claim expenses over and beyond that. That's not designed to cover all of their costs. It's just, as Jenny said, a thank you for jumping into the project with us.
Does that make sense, Jamie?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I guess I'm still pretty confused.
Okay, it's not, as Susan just said, it's not meant to cover any of your specific costs. So if you have expenses of seed or a specific amount of time that you're putting into the project or equipment, if you have to hire people to help collect data, all of those are still eligible costs. The $2,500 incentive or stipend, that's just a gift. Just for participating in the program, you can claim up to $2,500 because you are a participant.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Yep. So thank you for saying it didn't make sense the first time. Sean, do you have a question or anybody else?
Steve Dirks, go ahead.
I just got a quick question. If you utilize for the 0N plot, if we utilize like a starter with nitrogen in it, that's our main phosphorus source, are we just gonna have to cut out the complete starter for that plot or section, or how's that work?
That's a Jerry question.
Yeah.
Jerry, if you want to take that now, or?
Sure. No, I think in most of our research studies that we look at this, we account for the starter. That's kind of a standard protocol. If you want to eliminate it, I think that's part of the design, but in a lot of cases, we understand that's a way to get additional nutrients added at that time of planting. So with the starter, we sometimes just don't account, or will account for that in the total. And so you won't have a true zero, so to speak, but we know that that starter is all that's in that plot. So it's not we can figure that out into the design.
Okay, gotcha. So it would be acceptable to keep it then?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, is all the data that's collected from these plats open record?
Amber, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the data would be public record, but it would not necessarily be tied to a specific landowner or parcel of land.
Yeah, that's a good question. So technically all data that is held by the UW is open record, as you know, Steve. I think that like our intention would be to always make sure that data was not presented in such a way that it was tied to individual farms. That being said, I'm not sure like if there was a specific open records request. I don't know that there's a way that we could like anonymize data or if that's the intent. I guess that's something that we'd have to talk with DATCP about if that's part of the intent. I know there's a clause in the, help me out, Susan, there's a clause in there that talks about like, because this data was collected with intent to provide more information, that there's like a non-criminalizing clause, right?
Yes, anybody, an agricultural producer and the UW system collaborating with the agricultural producer implementing a project may not be held civilly liable and may not be subject to any enforcement action from DATCP or DNR, just in case there is any environmental releases from this project. So as long as you're following the research protocols and your agreement with us, there's no administrative or enforcement actions that could be taken. Also on page 9 of the RFP there is a section called open records. And we are, as is UW, we must follow the Open Records Act. If as a grant applicant, you have something that you feel is a trade secret, you can notify us of that as part of your application. And then that if we do get a request for stuff, our attorneys will look at what you've said is a trade secret when they're trying to figure out what can be released or not. So in terms of growing things, if there's, there's a lot of different types of agriculture, on this call right now, but if there's something that's maybe a little bit different that you're doing that you would consider a trade secret that makes your product different or unique in the marketplace, you would be able to mark that on your application for us to potentially hold from public records.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I got one more question. So with the nitrate samples at once, one prior to side dressing and prior to each application, and then one after harvest. But if one is putting 5 to 7 to 8 applications through the pivot or whatnot, are they requiring a sample after each application or just a handful? Or maybe that's more for Jerry.
You're kind of cutting in and out. I would say yes, more for Jerry, and 2, it would just be, again, with Jerry detailing your project plan.
Yeah, I think in some of those irrigated projects that we've done, we look at maybe the nitrate samples 2 weeks after application, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that, and then one at the end. So it all depends on, if it's a really dry year and you're irrigating, around the clock, we would look at it more as maybe in a periodic time frame, every couple of weeks or over 2-month period or something like that. But yeah, we'd work to make sure that there's some consistency to it, but not after every application. It wouldn't have to be.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions?
This is Dean Whiteman, Jefferson County Cell Builders. We have a project initiated already. I'd like to contribute our data to that, to the UW. I already talked to Jerry or texted Jerry back and forth a little bit about this. But what if we decided to continue this in another year? Can we get funding for the next year? We have to do that application now.
Yeah, so if you wanted
Because we're
to,
already funded this year.
so you're already funded for 2023.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying? You're already funded for 2023? You could submit an application and say your project is going to start in the fall of 2023 or in 2024. So if you already have
So we
funding,
just submit for a new project in 24.
yeah, so you could say you're gonna start with soil samples and at the fall of 2023 and your project will start the rest of it will start in 2024. You could definitely submit that. I would provide an explanation of kind of what you're doing in this initial year. And then your application would be for your first year of your timeline would be 2024, and then your second year would be 2025.
Oh, okay.
Is that what you mean by you already have funding for this?
Would we have to apply now? Or can this be done next year?
Yeah, so our funding right now, we have funding for this go round. We're hopeful we'll get additional funding in the state budget, but right now the $1.6 million is what we have. So there's no guarantee there's going to be another round. So if you really want to be part of this project, I would put something together and just have a delayed start date.
Any other questions?
I am curious. This is Dean again.
Yep.
We have multiple proposals, or shall we say protocols. This is a question for Jerry. How is that going to be compiled? I mean, these are different projects. They're not going to be all the same.
Well, I think that's, I think the main thing is the design has a solid research, or the project has a solid research design to it. I think that falls more to Matt and his lab that'll start to look at how some of this can be used and interpreted to kind of make those types of generalizations. But I think that the whole point of this is to have some creativity behind it, or at least look into specific local issues that are happening. And if there's things that Matt's lab can draw out, that's where it's headed. But I'll let Matt answer how it's going to be kind of coordinated from the data standpoint.
Right. No, it's going to be messy, right? And I think Jerry described it pretty well. We'd rather, right. The idea is let's get a bunch of interesting on-farm research going. We can put the story together later, right? So as long as it's interesting design or the statistical design's valid, then we can work with it. And then over time we can figure out, we can start to aggregate the data in different ways and come up with some bigger, some larger understanding from this. So I think this is, to me, the way I'm viewing this, as an extension specialist and a researcher, is that this is just a great way to build our data sets and do it on farm. So yeah, this year I expect this first year is going to be incredibly messy, right? For those that there's a couple on the line here that I've done on farm work with, it's messy, right? And the first time you do it, there's gonna be all these stumbling blocks. So the real thing is, let's just start doing something, and then we'll figure out how to streamline it later. Who's with me? All right.
Great advice, Matt. We're trying stuff, and that's a good attitude to have going into this, is we're gonna figure it out. We got another question is, what is the total amount of funding available through this grant, not the individual limit? There is $1.6 million available for this round of grants. So that is a very sizable amount of funding, which we're very excited about. So there are opportunities now that there may or may not be in the future. So if you have the ability to put together a proposal now, I would take that opportunity.
Any other questions? What came up in the chat, can we look at nitrogen optimization through manure or compost-based fertilizer sources?
This is a commercial nitrogen optimization program, so we are really looking at commercial fertilizer.
Does that mean that there can be no manure applied to the test area?
I would say if it's part of your study design, it can be worked in that way, it would potentially be okay, but that would be up to UW folks to. There's Jerry again.
Yeah, that's we've received, I guess, of the questions I've received through email or phone calls, that's been a pretty common question. I think, yes, the commercial fertilizer has to be part of it, but if there's something there that we wanted to look at, manure as a treatment in addition to some of the replication, or excuse me, some of the treatments definitely have to have that commercial nitrogen component to them. But if we want to compare something to manure or legume or something like that, I think we can design something along those ways, but there has to be commercial nitrogen fertilizer involved somewhere along the way.
Excellent questions. Matt, Jerry, Amber, do y'all have any general statements you'd like to make, or? It's
Just
messy.
keep calling Jerry as much as possible.
Calling Jerry.
Yeah, and so Matt is right now in the process of hiring a position, and so am I. And so we will, I guess, nobody's like been hired or anything. We're going through the screening and interviewing process. But so there will be a couple of new people that will be able to help you, probably, I don't know, maybe around the time the application is due. There will be a couple more people perhaps available to help with more questions, but we really appreciate that Jerry has taken this on to help us get it off the ground in the meantime. And I think that if you work closely with your regional, with whoever you may have in your region for extension, that's a crops and soils person, reaching out to them as well as Jerry is a nice way to try to continue to integrate like people that understand your local conditions. And just like what Matt said, we're definitely building this plane as we're flying it. So just knowing that you're part of the pilot part of this program. We don't have all the answers, but that's why good questions are really important and really help us to formulate something that works for everybody. So thanks for the really good questions today.
Yeah, I'll just add, be creative. I think if you can, if you got something you really want to study, we could, between Matt and I, we can figure the research side of it. So it's got some validity and the statistics can be run. So keep those ideas coming and we'll try to work with you the best we can to make it happen.
Thank you all. So Jerry's contact information is, I think, a couple times in the RFP, so that's on there. You can also reach out to DATCAP at our contact information is on the RFP as well. DATCAP, NOPP@wisconsin.gov is a good way to email us questions, and that information is also available on our website. And we're here to help you work through the application process, any concerns you might have with the actual application piece, questions about eligible costs, ineligible costs, send them our way. We want to make this a success.
Yes, definitely. Any last minute questions from anyone? Not really last minute, we have 10 minutes left, but. Okay. I would also, just in closing, also throw in your county conservation office as a place to go for maybe helping to find other people who are interested in doing the same kind of projects and building a group that way, or finding some more support. So lots of options out there. Okay, well, thank you all for your time. Again, please reach out with any questions you have. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.